Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, because it's afternoon here in Brazil. And I'm very, very happy to introduce my colleagues and friends, Million and Gaurav Raheja, both lead partners of Gaurav and me, and Gabriel are lead partners of the SMUS, of the Global Center of Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability. And Million is one of the two directors of SMUS. She is a professor at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the TU Berlin, while Gaurav is a professor of architecture at the Indian Technological Institute of Roorkee. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to this lecture, to this closing lecture, whose title is The Role of Visuality and Visual Methods in Urban Sustainability Research. So I hand over to you, and after your talk, we will have, if there is some little bit of time, I don't think we will have time for questions indeed. It's more the possibility of making a closure of the conference after your talk, because after that we will have the last sessions of our advanced methods courses. Okay, so I hand over to you, and thanks for this in advance for this closing lecture.
Yes, thank you very much for having us and for the honor of doing this closing lectures. My colleague Gaurav and me, we drafted the lecture together, so we will take turns in talking to you. And we decided on a topic, I would say, that's deeply embedded in the disciplines we are coming from. But of course, it also matters to a lot of you, also coming from disciplines beyond planning, design, and construction, since I noticed there's a number of sessions we had in this conference that dealt with questions of visual methods. And so I think we can build upon that. You can reflect about what we are presenting to you. And hopefully in the end, we also make you curious to the next conference to come. And Gaurav, will you start the presentation?
Am I audible? Yeah, before we start, and just for a clarification, Fraya, thanks for this honor to be sharing this space with Angela. Just wanted to share that after this lecture, I will need 5 minutes to do a welcome to the India SMUS conference. And I hope we will have that separate.
Yeah, you will have that. We will make the closure, and then I'll hand over to you to for us to leave Brazil symbolically and head over to India.
Yes, the role of visuality and visual methods in urban sustainability research and practice. And this joint presentation basically has 3 parts. We started with a small introduction, simply giving you some starting points of our thinking. And then we will talk about how can visual research methods contribute to urban sustainability in research and practice by giving some examples, and especially going to the setting of India here. And in the end, we also want to talk about conclusions in the sense of what are hurdles and strategies to be overcome when we are out there in practice, but also doing research for practice. And we will end with a small summary. And to start off, visual methods in planning, design, and construction, I said that already, are deeply embedded. They're embedded in the way we are educated, or we are educating future professionals. They're embedded in practice. And of course, when we go, or when we lean and do practice and do research especially, then also visual methods play a big role for us. And we often combine them also with other methods. And also we are aware that other disciplines like ethnography also uses visual methods, as well as we are combining our visual methods with observation and interviews, for example. But with this quote from Nigel Cross, it becomes clear that imaging, diagrams, and so on are deeply embedded in our thinking, how to conceptualize space, how to think space, how to analyze space. And we also want to highlight that we are today in a visual society. In the beginning, there was the painting, as some of my colleagues said in his lecture on the history of visual images, and they marked territories, they recorded historical events or stories, and they helped to enact rituals. And they lost, the visuality itself lost a little bit of its importance by the spread of, for example, lettering, or the invention of something like printings and also the telephone. And it is today, especially today, that the image, again, I would say, is on the fast lane of the road. Due to today's technical possibilities of image production, image reproduction, image dissemination, as well as also image digitization, society has become a lot more, again, a visual society. And I think if we reflect how fast images are spread, how also moving pictures, films, more videos, and so on are playing a role today, then we can certainly say that we live in a society that is very much shaped by visual impressions, and which images have to become maybe the most important means of communication. There may be differences throughout the world, but in many parts of the world, we would argue they are by far the most important means of communication right now. But coming to sustainable urban development, here we believe, and here I'm quoting and relying on a colleague that mostly published in German, that's why I translated his writing into English, but he is a very important person that did a lot of research and practice in participation and planning participation. And he said, here it is no longer a question of whether to communicate, but only how. How is involved into communication, what is taken into account and discussed, and in what ways the various point of views, because planning is about a lot of stakeholders coming together, a lot of perspectives coming together, and their concerns and interests are brought up for discussion in urban development. And we also believe that sustainable urban development is not only communication, it is even more, it has to be critical visual communication. And here here we are very much relying on the work of Gillian Rose, who looked in her work, and also in the books she wrote, and the handbook she wrote on visual methodology. She put forward a perspective on critical visual methodology, and we think that this critical visual has to be also part, and a lot more than it is right now, in planning practice. And critical visual methodology is an approach that thinks about the visual in terms of cultural significance, social practice, and power relation in which it is embedded. And that means thinking about power relations that are produced, that are articulated through and can be challenged by ways of seeing and imagining. But how, and here we are starting our second part of the lecture, how can, in fact, visual research methods contribute to urban sustainability? First of all, we think that visual methods are highly human-centric and spatial at the same time. Most times we believe it is that way. I think there are examples out there also where this is not being practiced, but most times visual methods are very close to humans and their practices, and they always deal with space because the visual embeddedness is given. Of course, they are also some substantiated by quantitative tools as well. These visual research methods help, and especially the combination of it, gathering data, analyzing and presenting data in a, we believe, in a more empirical and more factual real-time manner. And just to give an example is especially if we look also into human behavior study in a spatial context, and here we believe visual methods are somewhat a must, and to gain basically insight or to deconstruct the urban complexity and the complexity of human and also non-human environment interaction. And when relating this, and here I'm moving on to the next slide, to the concept of sustainability, it is important to remember that the complexity of the human, of the urban context, basically by the SDGs is broken down in different segments, like here, visual transported, you have these different segments. But in the end, if you enter through one of these segments, let's say you go through the door of SDG 11, a whole labyrinth of connections are open up. None of these segments or these different layers or levels of of each single SDG can be looked at by itself. We have entrance points, basically. We enter this complexity, but behind it, you find these various connections, like seeing here in an image, an action of Indian woman doing care work, being depending on clean water to sustain their reproduction duties, but at the same time, they are, of course, embedded into a context. Bettering, for example, of infrastructure will have an impact immediately on their health, on gender equality, on poverty, and so on. So this is one point I want to make. And the second point is, of course, if we enter one of these segments perspective and we have this labyrinth of connection behind it, they're much easier to navigate if we work in interdisciplinary teams. So this is another message we want to make, even beyond not only interdisciplinary, but we also need the connection between academic and practice to somehow really produce meaningful research results that enhance urban sustainability practice. Next slide. But we have to, for sure, acknowledge that the visual is not all. It's a first impression, an entrance gate into reading environmental contexts, understand, like seeing actions, trying to understand actions, but it does not give us the full picture of the subject, the human, or even I would also include non-human here. The human itself and its personal, very individual need is invisible for us. Their thinking experiences, we need additional methods in the end, the combination of visual methods with other inquiry tools. And these are, of course, drawn mostly from social scientists. So the combination of these tools, again, is the tool to unlock knowledge, to produce data, to read data, to interpret data that is enhancing urban sustainability practice. Next slide. But, and I think, well, it's not only a but, it's also potential. To keep in mind that over 90% of our researchers, and also a lot of people out there we're doing researching with and for, that 90% of our sensory inputs come via visual sense. So we have to be constantly aware that other senses which we could also use to read the environment, to understand subjects, have to come into play, are forgotten, and bear great potentials to be used in research. Next slides. To somehow conclude here, at this point, is that the human interaction, we believe, with the environment can be And here we had a nice discussion between Gaurav and me, if it is entirely, largely, but to a big extent, these interactions can be understood when the speciality of the context is taken into account as interactions occur in space. They're not somewhere, they are always embedded in a spatial context, and the spatial context also influences these actions. It's not something that's simply behind these people and like a staging. It's an interaction that is happening. And visuals help to convey this information, to gather it. And here I'm handing over to Gaurav to contextualize what I've just presenting in, also by giving examples from the Indian context.
Yeah, thank you, Ingela, for this background. The point that we are trying to make here is that the environment and the human interface needs to be studied, especially when we come from a very professional discipline, which expects many a time a word called solution. And how do you define solution? I'm sure we may not have consensus on one single definition. So the middle path to understand and interpret the word solution, I believe, is a state of that interaction which one perceives as better than before. Now, what that better than before is also constantly changing and dynamic. And therefore, the spatial context also needs to constantly evolve. And that is what the history of urban development tells us, that every space needs to realign to a new context with a new generation, with many new parameters, which are some of them seen and some of them unseen. So this on the right-hand side is a context from India, which was actually a space, which was an urban drain. And the place where you're seeing people are sitting and playing, youngsters, it has become one of the most famous public space. I believe people who will come to India for the SMUS India conference can actually visit this place, which is called Delhi Hut, which has transformed this. And I'm happy to share, it was designed by an alumnus from my own institution, who incidentally passed away in COVID times. So just to take this forward, I would say that we are not pitching to say that visual is all everything, but we are trying to say that visual does play a critical role. And here is another example, which is very, very clearly, openly being talked about across the world, including the United Nations, as a beautiful transformation of public spaces and streets over several hundred kilometers in the city of Chennai, which is down south in India. On the above side, you see there is an image called, which is the before, the real state of Chennai, which earlier it was, and the lower is the transformation that happened after those interventions. The point that we want to make here is this intervention was not merely a design intervention. This intervention was a process-oriented, visually mapped, critically analyzed, and participatory in nature intervention, because of which every kilometer of street that were being transformed received an acknowledgement from public. And that's how from 1 kilometer, it became 120 kilometers over the past several years of this investment in the city of Chennai. Every Indian city, every urban city has a different context. And therefore, one visual solution is not easy to be copied and replicated, which is what we realize in urban design, that it is not a methodological formula to design a solution, but it is a very strong visual cue, which gives you an impression of what safety, what accessibility, and each of these indicators can be actually mapped using some visual techniques that we talked about. To kind of summarize this common thing, frankly speaking, in a larger audience, especially where we deal with a lot of technological methods in institutions like ours, we find the popularity and the interpretation of visual methods is still on a very, very low key, because we live amongst the audience who interprets numbers much better than visuals, while in contrast to the fact that 90% of the visual sense is what receives the most information. So looking at this, we have been trying to understand that what those methods have been, including observation, which very often many researchers assume as a very trivial method, but perhaps becomes a starting point to even identify the research question. The second is the method of mapping, which is also, and all of these methods, I would say, on the axis of technology, have taken a new leap. So mapping using GIS, mapping, we all know, the spread of cholera in the UK was a starting point for the urban planners to look at health as a subject into an inquiry of urban planning. And now the advancement of the tools like GIS are able to analyze the forecasting of the city using mapping as a tool. Trace studies, which is about behavior and following shadows of people in terms of their movement patterns and their behavior, becomes very critical in Indian context and in many such global South contexts where you cannot predetermine the cultural patterns. Sketching, which is usually considered as a tool of art, but line sketches, visual notes across the travels become very important travel interpretations and very low cost tools, I believe, where especially even high technologies cannot reach. Measured drawings is a very critical tool for talking about any intervention which is physical in nature, because every millimeter costs a financial and an economic amount, and therefore measurement becomes a very critical tool there as well. Photo narratives, the advancement of technology, the fact that today photography is no longer a trait of the trade photo professional, but a tool even in the hands of amateurs in order to track information and in fact use that information to rate on a Likert scale using crowdsourcing as methods, is also becoming a tool for getting public participation. Then video ethnography, where from the photo you move into a motion of time, whether it is a time-lapse video or whether it is videos which take you into the past of narratives and dig deeper information, along with the digital techniques and virtual reality simulation, are all state-of-the-art methods, which of course need some degree of equipment and some degree of protocols to follow, but have become very powerful tools in not just the idea of visual research, but also visual investigation. To summarize this part of our talk, just to say that various methods, if you actually see, they are not all the same. One humble statement we would like to make here is that visual research, while everything is to be seen by the eye, but it is not the same. Every method has a different data source. Every method has its own set of limitations, and every method has its own creator and an interpreter. And therefore, it's very critical to understand that what is the level of training that is involved, and how do you select a method for which inquiry is still a subject which I think requires maybe more conversations in an interdisciplinary format, because none of these methods usually stands alone. It complements, or it is complemented by a mixed method depending on the inquiry, because visual may not always lead to an interpretation which is true. And that hypothesis leads us to understand the limitations of each method, and also understand by this tabulation that whether a particular method has a participatory nature or not. So if you see the column 2, it tells us whether column 1, which is divided in typologies, is whether it is non-participatory or whether it is participatory. So depending on if you're looking at the top-down approach, how photography, repeat photography, and different kinds of photo sessions itself provide that kind of a power, but that power has to be used sparingly with a lot of conscious knowledge to take it forward. So I'm just summarizing this at this point, and also to say that further advancement of technologies like AI, development of heat maps. In fact, we have been doing a study to understand during COVID, how was the housing spaces used and what was the occupant behavior in terms of time and movement within a small space. And this study could help us understand which spaces were potentially used for a longer period of time and what was its correlation in reference to the nature of work that was being done. If one wants to extend these studies to bring a correlation with human health, housing impacts, etc., I think those potentials are possible, but for that, visual evidence, heat map analysis becomes very critical, and that's where the role of softwares and digital science becomes very handy. To give you this quick example, the first image that you see was a study that we did in public spaces in Delhi, which was based on time lapse, the same space looked at over a repeat period of time. Parallelly, looking at the concept of video ethnography in the Times Square. And third, looking at simulation as a possibility with the VR assisted tools are all kind of on the same plane, but have very different impacts and levels of information that one can derive from them. So as a consequence, the key features that we understand the visual research methods bring is one, that they capture truly the ineffable, which is difficult, I would say, which can be open to 1,000 words like every picture, but definitely it provides one common point of concurrence. Second, it makes us pay attention to things in new ways. The same picture can be interpreted differently, distinctly by different researchers, and that's where a new form of collaboration comes into picture. Definitely one imagines that a picture can be far longer in memory than a text, though there may not be a scientific evidence to that, but it is a hypothesis that one assumes that pictures play much faster imageability on the human impression, and that's why they could play sometimes a quicker role when the methods are used in that way. The fourth is that it communicates more holistically, incorporating multiple layers and evoking stories or questions, which becomes a part of the feature that is involved in the expression of visual research methods. As part of human-centric design and design thinking, which is becoming a global phenomenon these days, the first principle we talk about is building empathy. We're not saying that only visuals can build an empathy, but visuals do play a significant role and can play an empathetic understanding about the context. Through metaphors and symbols, I think the idea of carrying theory with great elegance also happens through the image, and it encourages embodied knowledge. More accessible forms of knowledge transmission can perhaps happen through visuals if they are tactfully handled with scientific methodology behind it and reasoning as well. So also to kind of conclude this part of visual research methods, we are wanting to say is that it can provoke an action for social justice. If we recollect, a couple of years back, there was a child lying on the beach who got killed in Syria. That image shook the entire globe about the issue of human rights, about the issue of migration and immigration. And it can provoke new formats of questions with one stunning visual as well. So looking at this, I'm quickly bringing you through one case of India. I believe it can also be a precursor to welcome you to India, but this is a case from the western part of India, which is the city of Ahmedabad. This was a study done in 2014 about a public space, which is called the Manik Chowk. Chowk in India means a square, like a public space, but we will not call it a public plaza. It's just a public square. So you can see there is a gateway, which is an old stone arch, and below it is a kind of bazaar or a kind of movement space, in which people, and you can see the colors and the vibrance, and I'm not trying to interpret much more here, but just to give you a signal here, that's a very culturally dense city. Now, these traditional cities have a huge conflict between the modern development principles that have happened around the walled cities and the spaces which eventually are undergoing this transition between modern and the new. So the critical question here was that increasing vehicle domination was increasing. And this is a space in the city of Ahmedabad, which only sleeps for 3 to 4 hours in the entire time period. So as a consequence, this was studied using the various methods, including the time-based activity mapping, mobility of the people, and these were the visual impressions, which I'm quickly showing you about the Manik chalk, which talked about the pedestrian movements, which talks about the levels of activity. And this is how the region was also mapped in terms of whose control it had. Second, mapping the human environment interactions. Yes, Fraya, got the message?
Yeah, we sorry, but we have to finish to close because there are 3 hours of advanced methods courses ahead of us, and many of the people who are here will also be on the in the courses. Sorry, Gaurav.
Just finish this. So, well, this is the mapping of the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. So the same spatiality behaves very distinctly at different hours of the day. And this is how the visual mapping correlates with the photograph as an evidence to that, leading to the participatory approaches here where the people were involved in envisioning the space, which led to certain common principles and in revitalizing the spatial decisions. So what we are trying to say here is it's not merely visual research, but research leading to practice and empirical implementation. I'll from here, I think, pass it to Angela towards the concluding part.
Yes, and real quick conclusion to that. Next slide. We had the pleasure to bring together a number of practitioners and academics in a format called MOOC, Methods Open Online Courses. We were realizing within the Global Center. Next slide. And next slide. And basically, the teams from different countries picked different topics for the massive open online courses. Feel free to dive into them on our website. There you can see how topics of social housing, climate change, adaptive safety, gender and child-friendly or universal design have been addressed. But what's more interesting is that we use these teams of doing these MOOCs to discuss their hurdles in academia and practice to work together. And the conclusions out of that can be also seen on our website. And one conclusion is that there is still a huge gap between academia and practice. And visual methods are seen as one thing where they have a high potential to do from one thing, to fill the lack of reporting back results from academia to community stakeholders, which there is. So academia produces a lot of knowledge, but it never reaches practice. And it also is due to the formats. And here visual methods have a big potential and visualizations play a key role here. Next slides. And last but not least, to finish up, Gaurav, your turn.
Yes, so visual is critical to inquiry is what we would say. Over to you, Angela.
And visual is participation. It can be done with many partners, and I will make that illustrated by the last quote I give.
Yes, and the new technology is changing the visual research landscape very, very fast, and we perhaps realize the potential of it in mixing it with other methods now.
And again, I would invite you to have a look at the massive open online courses that have been produced by the MOOC partners and how they use the visual transfer of knowledge here in very different means and forms and what methods they've put forward.
And we believe that the visual resources and the research methods perhaps help us drive research towards implementation with evidence.
And last but not least, I'd like to finish with not with our words, but words of a practitioner, an urban practitioner who has been part of the MOOC team in Roorkee. And he said that he found mapping is very useful method, even down to the engineer and the municipal comparison. And if we take a map and show him or her that listens, this is a map and this is data that we have collected. And some of it is from people and some of it from other sources. This is what is shown. We found it much easier way to get people to understand. And this person from practice says that within the 5-6 years, he saw that Google Maps and also many other apps People are much more comfortable even to use tool of mappings and to read maps and translate complex data into very simple methodology of analysis and display in order for advocacy. And that's why I think this is the statement we want to let you go into the afternoon, and hopefully made you more interested, if you're not already, into visual methods.
With that, I think we thank you for your very patient listening in Brazilian. Obrigada, dankeschön, and thank you in Dhanyavad from India.
Many thanks to both of you. It was a very thrilling and really very not only a very broad explanation of, about your point, which I think can suit to all the different and various interests here by sociologists and also by urban planners and architects present here. Now, given that we are really running out of time, unfortunately, I would like you just to finish this conference, to close it. I would like to ask Nina Bauer and the team, the Brazilian organization team, to open up their cameras. Please, Khushbu, sorry, but is it a question to the regarding the lecture? Yes,
it's actually an important comment which I will quickly make right now. That working with street dwellers in India, I found planning to be top down and very exclusionary. So yes, we're talking about solutions, but also whose problem and whose solution, and it's very important to remember that. Thank you.
Thanks, Khushbu. Yes, now I'm just now would like to, unfortunately, it's amazing, but we finished, we are finishing this conference, and I would, before finishing, I would like to hand quickly over to Nina Bauer, and then we would also like to say some words to the Brazilian team, and then hand over to Gaurav for him to make the transition to India. Nina?
First of all, I again want to thank the whole Brazilian team for organizing this. We all know how much work it is, and we know how much time you spend on this, but you did such a wonderful job. It even makes me sad that we cannot be there in Berlin at the moment. So thanks again to all of you, both to you, Fraya, and to the whole organizing team. And also for not only for doing the wonderful program, but also the wonderful keynote speakers and the methods trainers. It was great, and I think it is a good example why it is worth rotating these conferences around the globe. Because what I also liked that while we're having some general themes, so we started in Botswana a discussion, and we are continuing, which is ongoing. At the same time, you can see that there are sort of specific themes that are specific to Latin America, but also interesting to the rest of the world, which you brought in. So, and also that you can see there's a local touch. And this is going to be also in a way pointing out that next year, in February, we're going to have a conference in India, in Roorkee, again, going to a different world region. And in contrast to this conference, we hopefully finally will be doing this, able to do this face-to-face, which has drawbacks. The drawback is that not maybe everybody who's interested can participate, but it has the advantage that we could start discussing face-to-face on all the topics we're having now. So let's try this out. And I'm saying this, that everybody who's listening, the call for abstracts is still going on, and there is travel scholarships, quite some, so it's worth applying. So please, if you're interested for coming to the conference, please do apply. But above all, thanks because we're still in this conference, thanks for really doing this to the whole Brazilian team from Germany and Thailand.
Yeah, and I would also like to thank my team, the Brazilian team, especially Ana Maria Machado and Camilo Flammarion, who have been totally engaged since the beginning, since everything started almost 2 years ago. And then since February, our team, our student team, our graduate student team, which includes Amanda Freitas, who is here. I'm not seeing her here, but nevertheless, she is here. I would also thank Beatriz Ventura, who was totally engaged, who was very stubborn regarding the importance of let's stick to let's do the program, let's organize it. Amanda with the musicians too, the website, both of them have been responsible for the website during these last months. I would also like to thank Paula de Carvalho and Yasmin Anefalos, who have been amazingly engaged and competent in managing our social media during all of these times, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And I would also like to thank Marta Hittner dos Santos and Dante Pezzin, who both have been totally also very concentrated and focused in answering emails and getting into contact with all the participants, with presenters, keynotes, and so on. And would also like to thank the 6 newly almost very late now more recently arrived students, graduate students who joined us for this conference, and they started working now at the beginning of September. So Luca Luiz, Simone Pereira, André Pinhel, and I would also like to thank Anne Freitas, let me see all of the people, and Mateus Mendonça, and Gabriela de Biagi. I hope I have mentioned all of you. And also, last but not least, Henrique Asif Hernandez, who is a undergraduate student in social sciences, and who has been a wonderful and very competent vector for our contact and communication with the Department of Sociology of USP. And he has been not only responsible for this social communication of SMUS at USP, at the Department of Sociology, and at the Faculty of Language, Philosophy, Languages, and Human Sciences, but has also been very active here during the conference, asking questions, commenting, and so on. So I'm really, really very glad to have had you with me. And I'm also glad that we will be able to meet in person. Thanks to SMUS, we are going to meet in person on the 23rd of September for a evaluation retreat about the conference, which will be held here in Sao Paulo, and we are looking forward to meeting each other. So actually, I thank you all, and I would like to ask you to clap or something like this, if it's possible. And then we managed it. And now I'd like to ask Gaurav to make the transition to India, and let's see how it will be in India.
So I will very quickly take you to this welcome to SMUS Conference India 2023. It is post midnight, so I believe we will not just travel physically, but you will travel into a different time space in the time zone. And I wholeheartedly welcome not just this audience, but everyone far and wide, SMUS and non-SMUS partners to this conference, which with Nina, Angela, and Fraya and Gabriel has been put together into a big way. And we are trying to work pretty hard while managing some parallel COVID events. So just to quickly give you this wrap up again, it's not just the SMUS conference, it's also the 3rd International and Interdisciplinary Conference on Spatial Methods for Urban Sustainability, as a 3rd RC33 Regional Conference Asia, organized by the GCS SMUS, as we all know, along with the research network from the quantitative methods, as we know, RN21. To take you further about the place where we are, so you know the orange space here is where we are in India, but India is so complex and large, perhaps to keep you grounded on that, we are in the northern side of India, closer to New Delhi, around 200 kilometers, and this institution happens to be celebrating its 175 years of existence this year, which means it was one of the oldest schools of engineering in the entire Asia, established by the British. And this conference is being hosted primarily at the Department of Architecture and Planning in support with the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Please mark your calendars and dates, 20th to 26th February 2023. We hope we begin a fresh new year, free from disease, good from well-being, and celebrate in being in India. This is the history of this institution, known for being very dominating in the world of civil engineering and later into urban infrastructure, especially on water as a subject, but now it's artificial intelligence and many other technologies as part of it. Taking it further, what the conference composition looks like. It's the first day is going to be a PhD day focusing on writing proposals and doctoral scholars about how the world of PhD is, led by Gabriela Christmann from Germany. And the day 2 and day 3 conceptualized as methods training courses. I will quickly tell you about that as well now. And the 3 critical days when the conference happens is 23, 24, and 25th of February, followed by a quick excursion on 26th, I hope near Roorkee, and let me keep that surprise for the now on. To sum it up, we are expecting around 4 keynotes, 6+ methods training courses, 26 sessions, and so far 80+ abstracts have already been received. We believe that number is going to go up with your contributions and with many more. And these are the broad areas, thematic areas, from digital humanities to anthropology, to sociology, to urban design, to planning, as broad themes in which we welcome and invite all your publications. The methods training courses, so far what seem to have been fixed is Professor Nina Bauer for qualitative methods, Professor Fraya, ethnographic research, Wolfgang on grounding theory, Jörg Strubling on survey methodology, Professor Engela and Ignacio on urban design methods, with Gabriel coming in here from cross-cultural methods in social science. Taking further through the sessions, this is how the session structures look like. I will not read all the details here, but they're all on the website. Please come to the SMUS India website for the conference, and you will find these, and looking forward for your submissions of abstracts for each of these sessions. And I believe that we will perhaps engage with all of you on a very productive co-creation of knowledge and knowledge exchange as we move further. And this is where with warmth, we welcome all of you. This is the SMUS team so far. I believe this is also going to grow further till the time we meet in February coming year. So we have, of course, myself and Nina here, my colleagues, Professor Manish Asthana and Professor Shubhajit from my other departments, and Professor Anindya Mishra, the head of humanities, along with other partners within the SMUS team, our scholars and other projects. I would say we very much look forward for you moving on from Brazil to India, and I hope you all have a very healthy time until then, but we are looking forward to hosting you in person. And thank you for this very patient listening. And in the Indian language, which is the national Hindi language, we call it Dhanyavad. And so we move on from Danke schön to Obrigado to the central line of our concurrence. So with that, I end my presentation and my welcome to everyone, each and everyone. If this is recorded, I believe it goes on to people even beyond the conference. Looking forward to welcome you all in India in person next year. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gaurav. Many thanks. Now, actually, we were too optimistic to imagine that we could finish in half an hour with all of these the closing lecture and the closure. But now I think time has come to, unfortunately, time has come to, for us to depart from one another. But I would like just to finish to highlight the role of Pablo Herrera and Bruno Santana from the Synthesis, who is the company who is supporting or who has supported all us in technical terms, and both of them have been crucial for the YouTube transmission of the conference. So many thanks to all. Keep safe and relax the Brazilian team for us all. Let's relax now. Yes, not now, but we have the courses in front of us, but nevertheless, we are almost there. Many thanks. Beijo to all of you, and bye.